The sound of the hospital heart monitor echoed softly in the quiet room. Beep, beep, beep. Ezekiel Hart, once the most powerful businessman in Lagos, sat by the window staring into the orange evening sky. He looked older than his 62 years, pale, thin, but still carrying that proud posture that came with decades of success. The doctor's words kept replaying in his mind. Mr. Hart, I'm sorry. The cancer has spread. You have about 6 months left. 6 months. 6 months to set things right. 6 months to face the ghosts of his past. He turned slowly toward the framed photograph on the bedside table. His son, Raymond, smiling proudly in his graduation gown. Ezekiel's eyes filled with tears. Raymond had been his only child, his only true joy. But Raymond was gone, killed in a suspicious car crash 2 years ago. Everyone said it was an accident, but Ezekiel's heart told him it wasn't. He had seen how his stepchildren, Collins and Vanessa, rejoiced after the funeral. They had always hated Raymond, the true heir to the Hart empire. He remembered overhearing them whisper once in the mansion hallway, "When the old man dies, everything will finally be ours." That memory burned inside him every day. Now, with death approaching, Ezekiel's greatest fear wasn't dying. It was leaving his fortune in the hands of those who had destroyed his son. The door creaked open softly. A young woman stepped in, carrying a tray of food. Her name was Ella Ojo, his 25-year-old assistant. She was poor, humble, but incredibly smart, the kind of girl who never forgot to greet everyone with a smile, even when life gave her nothing. "Sir, you haven't eaten anything all day," she said gently. Ezekiel smiled faintly. "How can I eat when I'm counting days instead of plans?" Ella set the tray down and adjusted his pillow. "Don't say that, sir. You'll be fine." He looked at her, almost amused by her optimism. "You really believe that?" "Yes," she replied softly. "I believe faith is stronger than fear." Her words struck him. For months, nurses and visitors had treated him like a dying man, but Ella treated him like someone who could still live. As she left, Ezekiel whispered to himself, "Maybe God sent you for a reason." That night, Ezekiel couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, watching the lights of Lagos twinkle below. Memories of Raymond flooded back, his laughter, his stubbornness, the way he called him dad instead of sir. He remembered the night of the crash, the rain, the call from the police, the sound of his own scream when they showed him the car wreck. He had tried to fight for justice, but money silenced the truth. The case was closed too fast, and Collins, his stepson, had quickly taken charge of the family company, acting as if Raymond had never existed. Ezekiel clenched his fists. He might be dying, but he wasn't powerless. If he couldn't live to see justice, he would create it before death came knocking. The next morning, his old friend and lawyer, attorney Desmond Afolabi, came to visit. Desmond was tall, calm, and loyal, one of the few people Ezekiel still trusted. "Ezekiel," Desmond said, setting down a file, "I've read your test results. I'm sorry, my friend." Ezekiel smiled bitterly. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying without justice." Desmond frowned. "You're still thinking about Raymond?" Ezekiel looked up. His eyes, though tired, still carried fire. "I know Collins and Vanessa had a hand in his death, but I have no proof. And soon, I won't have time." Desmond sighed. "What do you plan to do?" Ezekiel's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Something they'll never see coming." Days later, Ella came to help him sort through old company files. She worked quietly, focused, while Ezekiel watched her, the calm determination in her eyes, the way she spoke to him with respect but without fear. When she noticed him staring, she chuckled nervously. "Sir, are you okay?" He smiled. "You remind me of my son. Brave, honest, too good for this world." Her smile faded. "I heard about him. I'm sorry for your loss." He nodded slowly, his voice low. "They killed him, Ella. I can't prove it, but I know it. And before I die, I must make sure they never touch what's his." She stared at him, unsure what to say. "But how?" He looked straight into her eyes. "By turning my death into their biggest punishment." Ella frowned, confused, but didn't ask more. She could see he was serious. Dead serious. That night, Ezekiel wrote in his journal, the last entry he would ever make as a living man. He wrote about Raymond, about betrayal, and about Ella. Then he wrote a single line that would define everything that followed. If death is the only weapon left to me, then I shall use it to bring justice. He closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the darkness, "Let the countdown begin." Rain poured that night like heaven itself was mourning. Inside the Hart mansion, the storm rattled the windows while thunder rolled across the Lagos sky. Ezekiel sat by the fire, staring into the dancing flames. His thoughts were heavy, full of memories and plans that no one else knew. On the table beside him were two things: a half-empty glass of medicine and his lawyer's number already dialed on his phone. He pressed call. "Desmond," he said as soon as the attorney answered, "come over. I've made up my mind." Desmond paused. "About what?" "About how I'll die and how I'll make them pay." 30 minutes later, Desmond arrived, drenched from the rain. He placed his wet umbrella by the door and hurried into the living room. "Ezekiel, what's this about?" he asked. Ezekiel leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "You once told me there are many ways to protect what's mine, even after I'm gone." Desmond nodded carefully. "A will can do that." Ezekiel shook his head. "A will alone won't bring justice. I need to leave this world in a way that traps them, both of them." Desmond frowned. "You mean Collins and Vanessa?" "Yes," Ezekiel said firmly. "They think I'm dying. Good. Let them think I'm weak. But before the end, I'll make a move they won't expect." Desmond crossed his arms. "What are you planning?" Ezekiel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm going to fake my death. But first, I need a wife, someone I can trust with everything." Desmond's eyes widened. "A wife?" "Ezekiel, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." The next morning, Ella arrived as usual. She was holding files, her neat white blouse damp from the rain. She smiled softly. "Good morning, sir. You didn't sleep?" Ezekiel studied her. "Ella, do you believe in loyalty?" She blinked, unsure where the question was going. "Yes, sir. Loyalty is everything." He nodded. "And if someone trusted you with their life, could you keep that trust, even when the world turns against you?" Her voice softened. "If they trusted me that much, I'd die protecting them." For a moment, Ezekiel said nothing. He just stared into her eyes, searching for any sign of greed or deceit. There was none. "Then I've chosen the right person," he said. "The right person for what?" she asked. "To be my wife." Ella froze. "Sir, what did you just say?" "Marry me," he said calmly. "Not for love or money, but for justice." She set the files down, stunned. "Sir, this is madness. People will talk. They'll say I've lost my mind," he interrupted. "Let them. You don't understand, Ella. My son, Raymond, didn't die in an accident. He was murdered." Her eyes widened. "What?" Ezekiel's hands trembled as he opened a hidden drawer and pulled out a small black folder. Inside were old photos, police reports, and his son's last messages. Raymond discovered that Collins was stealing company money. He threatened to expose him. A week later, his car crashed. The brakes were cut. Ella covered her mouth. "Oh my God. I had investigators look into it," he continued. "Every trace led to them, Collins and Vanessa, but they covered it well. Money, power, lies. I couldn't prove it." He looked up, his voice breaking. "They took my son from me, Ella, my flesh and blood. And now, they're waiting for me to die so they can inherit what's his." A tear rolled down his cheek. "That's why I need you." She swallowed hard. "Me? Yes. You'll be my wife on paper, my legal heir. When I'm gone, they'll think they've won. But instead, they'll face the same pain they gave me." Ella sat silently for a long moment. "You trust me that much?" Ezekiel smiled faintly. "You're the only person who still sees me as a man, not a bank account. You've cared for me without expecting anything." Her eyes glistened. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he whispered. "Do this for Raymond. For justice." 3 days later, under soft morning sunlight, a quiet ceremony took place in the mansion's private garden. Only Desmond and 2 loyal staff witnessed it. Ella wore a simple white dress. Ezekiel stood beside her, frail but proud, dressed in a dark suit that hung loosely on his thin frame. When the officiant asked, "Do you take this man?" Ella hesitated, then looked at Ezekiel's tired but determined eyes. I do. When it was his turn, Ezekiel's voice was weak but clear. I do. With all that I am, and all that I leave behind. After the short ceremony, Desmond signed the legal documents. The papers named Ella Hart as the lawful wife and inheritor of all Ezekiel's assets. That evening, as rain fell again, Ezekiel sat in his study writing a letter. Ella entered quietly, standing behind him. You don't regret this? She asked. He turned, smiling faintly. Regret? No. You've given me peace for the first time in years. She looked down. What happens now? He folded the letter carefully. Now? I dot. Her eyes widened. Sir. Not for real, he added with a grin. Not yet. But soon, everyone will think I have. He handed her the sealed letter. When the time comes, give this to Desmond. Don't open it. Just follow his instructions. She nodded slowly, fear and determination mixing in her heart. Sir, whatever happens, I'll stand by you. He reached out and placed a trembling hand on hers. And that's why I chose you. The morning came quietly, but the air inside the Hart mansion felt heavy, almost funereal. Ezekiel Hart sat at his mahogany desk, staring at the blank sheet before him. His pen trembled as he wrote slowly, his breath shallow between each line. I can no longer fight this pain. I've lost my son, my strength, and my will to live. Let my death bring peace to those I leave behind. Ezekiel Hart. He set the pen down, exhaled, and whispered to himself. The world will think I've given up. But I'm only getting started. The plan had taken weeks to perfect. Attorney Desmond had arranged everything, from forged medical reports to a confidential funeral home willing to cooperate for a hefty sum. Only 3 people knew the truth: Ezekiel, Desmond, and Ella. That evening, Ella helped him to his room. He was weaker now. His coughs came harder, his skin paler. She covered him with a blanket and hesitated at the door. Sir, she said softly, are you sure this is the right thing? Ezekiel looked up, eyes calm but full of weight. Ella, when a man has 6 months left, he must choose how to use them, for pity or for purpose. I've chosen purpose. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. Then I'll make sure no one ruins your plan. He smiled faintly. That's my brave girl. Later that night, thunder rolled over Lagos. The rain fell hard, washing the streets clean, as if the heavens themselves were preparing for what was to come. Ezekiel sat in his study, dressed in a plain shirt and trousers. In front of him was a bottle of sleeping pills and a glass of whiskey. The note he'd written earlier lay open on the desk. He glanced once at a framed photo of Raymond and whispered, I'll see you soon, my son, but not yet. Then he poured the pills into his palm. He didn't swallow them. Instead, he dropped them into the glass, letting them dissolve just enough to look convincing. Desmond had arranged a harmless replacement, white tablets that mimicked the appearance but not the effect. Moments later, Desmond entered through the back door, holding a medical bag. Are you ready? He asked quietly. Ezekiel nodded. Let's begin. Desmond gave him an injection that slowed his pulse to an almost undetectable rhythm. Within minutes, Ezekiel's breathing faded until it was barely visible. His skin turned pale, his hands still. To anyone who saw him, he would look dead. Desmond called Ella in. She froze when she saw him. Sir. Her voice broke. Desmond whispered, he's alive. But no one must know. Tears streamed down her cheeks anyway. She leaned over and whispered, sleep well, sir. The world will soon pay for what it did to you. The next morning, screams echoed through the mansion. One of the maids had entered the study and found Ezekiel slumped over his desk, the empty pill bottle beside him. The police arrived. Reporters swarmed outside the gate. Within hours, headlines flooded the news. Business mogul Ezekiel Hart dies by suicide. Sources say billionaire was depressed after son's tragic death. Collins and Vanessa arrived from their separate homes, pretending to cry, but their fake sobs could not hide the spark in their eyes. Vanessa whispered to her brother, finally, it's all ours. The funeral was arranged in record time. A closed coffin was displayed in the living room. Few noticed that the body inside was a wax figure, crafted with uncanny precision. Desmond ensured it remained sealed, claiming medical reasons and respect for the deceased. Ella stood quietly by the coffin, dressed in black lace, veil covering her face. Her tears were real, but not for the man in the coffin, for the man hiding miles away, risking everything to expose the truth. Collins approached her mockingly. "So, you're the new wife, huh? Congratulations. You'll be going back to the streets soon." Vanessa smirked. "Don't get too comfortable. Once the will is read, we'll handle the company." Ella said nothing. She simply looked at them and whispered, "We'll see." They laughed and walked away. They didn't notice Desmond watching them from a distance, memorizing every expression of greed. That same night, Desmond drove quietly out of the city, taking the old highway toward Ogun State. The rain had stopped. Mist covered the lonely road. He arrived at a small farmhouse, hidden behind rows of cocoa trees. Inside, Ezekiel sat on a simple bed, wrapped in a blanket. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but alive. Desmond smiled. "You're officially dead." Ezekiel gave a weak laugh. "Then it's time to see who celebrates." He turned on a small radio, and as expected, the news anchors praised his legacy. Collins and Vanessa gave interviews, pretending to be heartbroken while hinting at plans to continue their father's vision. Ezekiel listened silently, his hands trembling with rage. "They sound proud, like vultures circling a fresh corpse." Desmond nodded. "Let them feast for now. They don't know the will." Back at the mansion, Ella handled reporters and legal visitors with grace. She spoke little, smiled rarely, but carried herself with quiet power. One night, alone in her room, she found herself staring at her reflection. "I'm Mrs. Ella Hart," she whispered. "The world thinks I married for money, but only one man knows the truth." Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. A deep voice said, "It's time." Her heart skipped. "Sir?" "Yes," Ezekiel whispered from the farmhouse. "The trap begins tomorrow. The will reading is scheduled. Be brave, and remember, grieve in public, but fight in silence." The living room of the Hart mansion buzzed with murmurs and camera flashes. Every reporter, relative, and lawyer in Lagos seemed to have gathered to witness the reading of Ezekiel Hart's will. At the center sat attorney Desmond Afolabi, his expression calm but unreadable. Beside him, dressed in mourning black, was Ella Hart, the young widow everyone gossiped about. Across from her sat Collins and Vanessa, Ezekiel's stepchildren, wearing perfectly practiced masks of grief. Collins leaned toward his sister. "Finally, the empire returns to its rightful owners," he whispered. Vanessa smirked. "That girl will soon be back on the street where she belongs." They both laughed quietly, unaware that their father's ghost was smiling somewhere far away. Desmond cleared his throat and began. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Ezekiel Hart, written and signed in the presence of legal witnesses." The room fell silent. "To my beloved stepchildren, Collins and Vanessa Hart." He paused. Both of them straightened, their smiles widening. "I leave my forgiveness." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Desmond continued. "You both brought me pain, but I pray one day you'll find peace within yourselves. You will, however, receive no part of my estate, shares, or company holdings." "What?" Vanessa shouted, leaping to her feet. Collins slammed his fist on the table. "This must be a joke." Desmond didn't flinch. "Please sit down." Vanessa's voice trembled with rage. "You expect us to believe our father left everything to some house girl?" Desmond's eyes met hers coldly. "Correction, his wife." The entire room gasped. Flashes from cameras went off like lightning. Journalists whispered rapidly, scribbling notes. "According to this document," Desmond continued, "Mr. Ezekiel Hart legally married Miss Ella Ojo 3 months before his passing. She is the sole and legal heir to all his assets." Ella sat silently, hands folded in her lap. Her face was calm, but her heart pounded wildly. Collins shot to his feet, voice booming. "Over my dead body. This gold digger trapped him." Desmond looked at him sharply. "Watch your words, Mr. Hart. This room is full of witnesses." Vanessa sneered. "Witnesses to fraud." Ella slowly removed her veil and met their eyes. Her voice was steady but soft. You can insult me, but you both know he didn't trust you. He saw what you truly are. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Relatives whispered. Collins stormed toward Ella, pointing a shaking finger at her. You think you've won? You'll regret this. Desmond stepped between them, his tone cold as steel. Mr. Hart's instructions were clear. Any attempt to harm Mrs. Hart will result in immediate police involvement. There are already measures in place. Collins froze. What kind of measures? Desmond leaned closer. The kind that don't forgive crimes. Vanessa grabbed her brother's arm and hissed, "Calm down. Not here." They stormed out, slamming the mansion doors behind them. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving only Ella and Desmond in the quiet room. Ella sighed shakily. I didn't think it would go this far. Desmond gave a faint smile. It's just begun. They'll come for you, but don't be afraid. Remember, every step they take brings them closer to their own trap. That night, Collins and Vanessa met at a luxury bar downtown. Vanessa slammed her drink on the table. That which stole everything. Everything. Collins leaned back, his face twisted with fury. No, she's a pawn. We'll make her pay, slowly. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? We'll scare her. Make her paranoid. Then, we'll finish what we started. He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a photo. Ella walking out of the company headquarters. Vanessa smirked. So we watch her first? No, Collins said darkly. We break her first. Back at the mansion, Ella couldn't sleep. Every sound in the hallway made her jump. She remembered Ezekiel's words. They'll come for you, but fear will only make you weak. She sat by the window, clutching his old wristwatch, whispering to herself, I promised you, sir. I won't fail. The next morning, she arrived at the company boardroom. The directors looked uneasy, unsure how to treat her. She stood tall, her voice firm. I know what some of you think, that I don't belong here. But Ezekiel Hart trusted me, and if I let fear silence me, I'd betray him. So, I will lead this company with honesty. Anyone who can't accept that is free to leave. There was silence. Then, slowly, one of the senior directors nodded. Mrs. Hart, you have our support. Ella smiled faintly. Thank you. But as she left the meeting, she didn't notice a man in a cap watching her from across the street. Collins' driver, snapping photos of her every move. That evening, Ella received an envelope at the gate. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 chilling words. You're next, widow. Her hands trembled. She looked around, but the street was empty. Desmond came that night, when she called, furious. It's starting, he said. They're getting desperate. Ella whispered, they'll kill me. Not if we strike first, Desmond replied. He placed a recorder on the table. We'll trap them, just like he planned. The next week passed in quiet tension. Ella barely slept. Every night, she heard strange knocks, footsteps in the corridor, whispers that vanished when she turned around. But she didn't run. She remembered Ezekiel's words. If you run from fear, it wins. If you face it, it breaks. So she waited. She pretended to be vulnerable, the perfect target. Attorney Desmond visited secretly one evening, his eyes sharp behind his glasses. It's time, he said. We give them what they want, a chance to destroy you. Ella looked nervous. What do you mean? He laid out a small recorder, a hidden camera, and a new SIM card. Collins called you yesterday, didn't he? She nodded slowly. He said he wanted peace. That we should talk. Desmond smiled thinly. Good. Accept his invitation. But wear this. He handed her a pendant. Hidden mic. The camera will be in your purse. Police will be watching from 2 streets away. Ella swallowed hard. What if they actually try to kill me? Desmond's eyes softened. Then we make sure they fail. Ezekiel's plan only works if they expose themselves. The next day, Ella met Collins at a secluded restaurant on the outskirts of the city. He was already there, sipping red wine, smiling like a wolf in silk. Mrs. Hart, he said smoothly, you look beautiful in black. Still mourning, I see. She forced a small smile. It's only been weeks. He leaned forward. Look, I was angry before, but I want peace. You're young. You don't need to handle all that business stress. Hand me half the company's shares, and we'll call it truce. Ella raised a brow. Half. Let's be honest, he said. You married my father for comfort, not control. You can keep the mansion, the cars, just give me what I deserve. She chuckled softly. And what do you think you deserve, Collins? His expression darkened. Everything. He dropped his voice. Because that old man took everything from my mother. I just took back what was mine, starting with Raymond. Ella froze. What do you mean? Collins realized his mistake and laughed nervously. Nothing. Just talking. But the recorder caught every word. Meanwhile, Vanessa was at home pacing. She had been following the meeting through a phone line tapped to Collins' earpiece. Stop talking too much, she hissed. You'll ruin everything. Relax, he whispered back. I've got it under control. But Vanessa didn't trust him. She had her own plan. That night, she sent 2 men, masked and armed, to break into Ella's mansion and finish the job. They waited until midnight, then climbed the back fence. But what Vanessa didn't know was that the house was wired with hidden cameras, installed by Desmond earlier that week. Inside the farmhouse, miles away, Ezekiel and Desmond watched the footage on a laptop screen. Ezekiel's frail hands trembled as he whispered, "It's happening." In the mansion, Ella sat alone in the living room, pretending to read. The clock ticked past midnight. The front door creaked. 2 men stepped in quietly, faces covered, machetes glinting under the dim light. "Search upstairs," one whispered. "She's in her room." But Ella was right there in the shadows. Her heart raced, but she stayed calm. When one of them spotted her, he growled, "There she is." They lunged, but before they reached her, sirens wailed outside. Police cars surrounded the compound. "Hands up. Don't move." The men froze, caught off guard. The officers stormed in, guns drawn. The intruders dropped their weapons immediately. Ella sank into a chair, shaking. Desmond stepped out from the hallway, smiling slightly. "You played your part perfectly." At the police station, the 2 arrested men broke easily. They confessed to being hired by Vanessa Hart, payment promised upon completion. The police moved swiftly. Vanessa was arrested at her home before sunrise, still in her nightgown, shocked and furious. "You can't do this. You have no proof," she screamed. The officer showed her the recorded confession. "You'll see proof in court." Hours later, Collins was arrested too, caught trying to cross the border into Benin Republic. They found fake passports, cash, and a phone filled with messages between him and Vanessa. That evening, Desmond met Ella again in his office. He smiled as he handed her a small USB drive. "Everything's here," he said. "Their conversations, the confessions, the attempt to kill you. Enough to end them legally." Ella's eyes widened. "So it's over?" Desmond shook his head slowly. "Not yet. The world must see who they really are." He opened his laptop and played the recording of Collins' earlier statement. "That old man took everything from my mother. I just took back what was mine, starting with Raymond." Ella gasped. "He confessed to murder." Desmond nodded. "Exactly. And tomorrow, everyone will know." The next morning, the breaking news shocked the nation. Collins and Vanessa Hart arrested for attempted murder and embezzlement. Confession reveals late Raymond Hart's death was premeditated. As reporters gathered at the courthouse, a black car pulled up. The door opened slowly. A tall, frail man stepped out, face hidden under a dark hat. The crowd murmured, cameras flashing. "It can't be," one reporter whispered. "That's Ezekiel Hart." The man removed his hat. It was him. Vanessa screamed from her cell. Collins went pale. The crowd went wild. Ezekiel looked straight at them, voice strong despite his weakness. "You thought you buried me, but all you buried was your shame." The cameras clicked endlessly as Ezekiel turned to Ella and nodded. "You did well, my daughter. Justice begins today." The courthouse was packed that morning. Journalists filled every seat, their cameras clicking nonstop. Curious onlookers gathered by the gate, whispering and pointing toward the black SUV that had just arrived. Out stepped Ezekiel Hart, alive, frail, but walking tall. The man the world had buried was back from the dead. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Reporters screamed his name, snapping photos like lightning. "Mr. Hart, how are you alive? Was your death staged? What really happened?" Ezekiel said nothing. He just smiled faintly and kept walking, flanked by police officers and his attorney, Desmond Afolabi. Behind them walked Ella, her face calm, her spirit strong, the widow who had carried his secret to the end. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. On one side sat Collins and Vanessa, handcuffed and furious. Their expensive clothes couldn't hide their guilt or the fear in their eyes. Vanessa glared across the room. "He should be dead," she hissed. Collins whispered back, "Stay quiet. Maybe we can still twist this." The judge entered. Everyone rose. The trial began. Desmond stood first. "Your lordship, the prosecution will show that the defendants, Collins and Vanessa Hart, conspired to murder Mr. Raymond Hart and later attempted to murder Mrs. Ella Hart, their father's lawful wife, to gain access to his estate." Gasps filled the courtroom. The defense attorney tried to object, but Desmond continued confidently. "To prove this, we will call our first witness, Mr. Ezekiel Hart." Ezekiel rose slowly and made his way to the witness stand. The courtroom went silent. His voice, though weak, carried authority. "2 years ago, I buried my only son," he began. "They said it was an accident, but I knew the truth. I felt it here." He touched his chest. "A father always knows." He turned to his stepchildren. "You smiled at his funeral. You told me to move on. But you didn't just kill my son. You killed my peace." Vanessa shouted, "That's a lie." The judge banged the gavel. Silence. Ezekiel continued calmly. "When I fell sick, I realized I had little time left. But I refused to die a fool. So I created a plan, one that would show your true faces to the world." He looked at Ella, his eyes softening. "I married this young woman because I saw honesty in her eyes. She agreed to help me even when she had nothing to gain. And together with my attorney, we staged my death." The courtroom buzzed again. Disbelief, admiration, shock. Ezekiel turned back to the judge. Everything that happened afterward, the threats, the attack, the confessions, it was all part of their greed. And greed always exposes itself. Desmond then played the recordings on a projector screen. The video began. Collins sitting in the restaurant, smirking. "That old man took everything from my mother. I just took back what was mine, starting with Raymond." Gasps and murmurs swept through the courtroom. Vanessa covered her face, trembling. Then came the second clip, the masked men's confession. "Madam Vanessa said we should scare the woman. She said the money would come after we finished the job." The evidence was clear, undeniable. The judge leaned forward. "Do the defendants have anything to say?" Collins stood up, desperate. "He's lying. He faked his death just to frame us." Ezekiel looked at him sadly. "I didn't need to frame you, son. You framed yourself with your own mouth." Vanessa broke down completely, sobbing. "I didn't mean for Raymond to die. It was Collins' idea." Collins shouted, "Shut up, Vanessa. Don't drag me down." The courtroom erupted again. Police officers moved quickly to separate them as they screamed and cursed at each other. The judge banged the gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order!" When silence finally returned, the judge's voice was cold and final. "The court has heard enough. Collins and Vanessa Hart, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Raymond Hart and the attempted murder of Ella Hart. May justice serve as a lesson to the world. Greed destroys everything." The gavel struck. The sentence was sealed. As Collins and Vanessa were led away, cameras flashed wildly. Vanessa screamed, "You'll rot in guilt, old man. You'll die alone." Ezekiel simply closed his eyes. "I already made peace with death." Reporters flooded toward him as police escorted them out of the court building. "Mr. Hart, why did you fake your death? What will happen to your company now?" He paused at the courthouse steps, turned toward the crowd, and said quietly, "Sometimes justice needs disguise. My death exposed the truth. But my life belongs to peace now." Then he coughed violently, clutching his chest. Ella rushed to hold him. Desmond's face turned pale. "We need to get him to the hospital, now." In the hospital room that night, Ezekiel lay surrounded by quiet machines and the soft beeping of monitors. Ella sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "They're gone. Raymond can finally rest." He smiled faintly. "And so can I." Desmond entered the room with tears in his eyes. "The whole country is talking about you, Ezekiel. You're a legend now." Ezekiel chuckled weakly. "No, just a father who refused to die blind. He turned to Ella. Promise me something. Anything, sir. Promise me you'll use what I leave you to help others. Not for revenge, but for hope. Ella nodded, her tears falling. I promise. He smiled again, whispering softly. You remind me of my son, kind and brave. Then his hand fell still. The monitor flatlined. Ezekiel Hart was gone, for real this time. The morning sun rose gently over Lagos, casting golden light across the Hart mansion. The once cold house now felt alive again, peaceful, calm, and full of new beginnings. Ella stood by the balcony, dressed in a simple white gown, the same color she had worn on the day she became Ezekiel's wife. But this time, she wasn't pretending. She was no longer just his assistant. She was the keeper of his legacy. 3 months had passed since Ezekiel's death, his real death. The court case was over, and the names Collins and Vanessa Hart had vanished from public sympathy. They were now behind bars, serving life sentences for the murder of Raymond and the attempted murder of Ella. But Ezekiel's story didn't end there. Using the inheritance he left her, Ella fulfilled the promise she made beside his hospital bed. With attorney Desmond's help, she established the Raymond Hart Foundation, a charity for orphans, widows, and sick children across Nigeria. Every wall of the new building bore Ezekiel's portrait, smiling, peaceful, proud. During the launch event, journalists asked her, Mrs. Hart, why did you decide to start this foundation instead of expanding the company? Ella smiled softly. Because money doesn't heal hearts, but kindness does. Mr. Hart didn't just leave me wealth, he left me purpose. Applause filled the air. Even Desmond wiped a tear from his eyes. That night, after the event, Ella returned home to the quiet mansion. The rain was falling softly outside, tapping the windows like a gentle rhythm of memory. She walked into Ezekiel's old study, untouched since his last day. The air smelled faintly of his cologne and aged books. On the desk lay a brown envelope she hadn't opened yet. It was addressed in his familiar handwriting. To my daughter, Ella. Her hands trembled as she opened it. My dear Ella, if you are reading this, it means my time on earth is done. I have no regret, because you gave meaning to my final days. You showed me that goodness still exists, even in a world poisoned by greed. I have left this mansion, the company, and all I own in your care. But remember, true wealth is not what sits in your bank. It's what you give back to the world. Let love guide your choices. Let kindness be your legacy. Ezekiel Hart. Ella pressed the letter to her chest, her tears falling silently. You'll always be part of me, sir, she whispered. I'll make you proud. A week later, Desmond visited her at the mansion. He looked tired but content. You've changed this place, Ella. It feels lighter. She smiled. It feels like peace. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. Desmond nodded. He'd be proud. The entire city talks about you now. The assistant who became a wife, then a widow, then a symbol of hope. Ella laughed softly. Life is strange, isn't it? He chuckled. It is. But sometimes, it takes tragedy to reveal the best in us. They shared a quiet moment of reflection. Outside, the garden bloomed again. Flowers Ezekiel once planted with Raymond now blossomed brighter than ever. One afternoon, while Ella was visiting the foundation, she met a young boy about 12 years old. He was sitting alone in the hallway, drawing on a piece of paper. She knelt beside him. What's your name? The boy smiled shyly. Raymond. Ella froze for a moment. Raymond? She repeated. Yes, ma'am, he said proudly. My mom said I was named after a kind man who helped her before he died. Tears welled in her eyes. Do you like to draw, Raymond? He nodded eagerly. Yes. I want to be an architect one day. Ella smiled, touched. Then you'll build homes and hearts. She hugged him gently, feeling something inside her finally heal. It was as if Ezekiel's spirit was smiling through that boy. That evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Ella stood outside the foundation building with Desmond. The signboard glowed under soft lights. The Raymond Hart Foundation, for every child who deserves a future. Desmond turned to her. You've done what most people never could, turned revenge into redemption. Ella looked up at the sky, her voice calm and full of gratitude. Because that's what he taught me. Justice brings closure, but kindness brings healing. A soft breeze blew through the courtyard, lifting her hair. For a moment, she felt a familiar presence beside her, Ezekiel's calm voice whispering in her ear. You did well, my daughter. Rest now. The storm has passed. She smiled through her tears. Thank you, sir. Years later, the story of Ezekiel Hart and Ella became legend, retold in classrooms, documentaries, and sermons. People remembered him not as a ruthless billionaire, but as the man who died twice to save justice. And they remembered Ella as the woman who turned pain into purpose. At the annual foundation anniversary, Ella stood before hundreds of children, now healthy and happy. She looked at their faces, so full of hope, and whispered softly to herself, "This is what he wanted. This is what love looks like." The camera pans upward to the sky. The clouds part slightly, revealing a soft golden light streaming down upon the foundation building. It feels as if heaven itself is smiling. In a world filled with greed and betrayal, one dying man proved that truth always finds its voice, and one brave woman showed that love can rewrite even the darkest story. Justice was his weapon. Kindness was her victory.